There is a particular kind of silence that only exists in a house after a funeral. It's heavy. It sits in the corners of rooms, on the chairs where people were just sitting, in the echoes of their goodbyes. The flowers are too bright. The food, untouched on the platters, feels like a decoration from another life. And everyone has gone home. Back to their lives. Back to their noise. And you are left alone with that silence. I was standing in my mother's kitchen. Her kitchen. It didn't feel like mine yet. Maybe it never would. The clock on the wall, the one shaped like a sunflower, ticked too loudly. It was the only sound. My brother and his family had left an hour ago. My husband, Mark, was upstairs trying to sleep. He'd been my rock for days, and now he was just tired. We were all so tired. I was wiping the already clean counter, my hands moving on their own, when I saw it. A simple white envelope, tucked between the cookie jar and the little ceramic hen where she kept her tea bags. My name was written on the front, in her handwriting. That loopy, graceful script I'd seen on birthday cards and grocery lists for 43 years. My dearest Clara, it said. My breath stopped. The world narrowed to that rectangle of paper. She must have placed it there knowing I would be the one to clean up, knowing I would find it here, in the heart of her home, when I was finally alone. This is the story of that letter, and how a few pages of my mother's handwriting taught me more about her, about love, and about myself than a lifetime of conversations ever had. A montage of warm, slightly faded photos, a young woman with her mother in a garden, family dinners, Christmas mornings. The present-day Clara walks slowly through the quiet house, touching objects. My mother, Eleanor, was the kind of person who created calm. Our home was always gentle. There was no shouting. Disagreements were discussed over cups of chamomile tea. She believed in order, in kindness, and in the power of a perfectly made bed. She was my best friend, especially after Dad passed away 10 years ago. We spoke every day, sometimes about nothing. The price of tomatoes, a funny cloud, what we were watching on television. I thought I knew everything about her. Her favorite color was daffodil yellow. She hated the feeling of velvet. She could recite every line from The Sound of Music. She put lemon in her tea, never milk. She was afraid of deep water. These were the facts of my mother. I had collected them like precious stones my whole life, and I thought I knew our story. The simple, clean story of a mother and a daughter. She was the steady ground. I was the tree that grew from it. I had a good life, a quiet life, married to Mark, a kind man who taught history at the local high school. We didn't have children. That was a sadness, a quiet space in our home, but we had filled it with other things, books, our dog, Frank, long walks. It was a life my mother approved of, a peaceful life. My brother David was different, loud, successful, always moving. He lived 2 hours away with his wife Susan and their 2 boys. Mom adored them. She would light up when they visited, though you could see the exhaustion in her eyes after they left, the happy chaos of it all. David and I, we loved each other, but we were like 2 different languages. He spoke in achievements and big plans. I spoke in quiet days and familiar routines. The week of the funeral was a blur of dark clothes and soft voices, people holding my hands, their palms damp with sympathy, the smell of lilies, which now I think I will always associate with loss. David handled the arrangements. He was good at that. Practical. I just floated. I held Mark's arm. I nodded. I thanked people. It was only when it was all over, when the last car pulled away from the curb, that the real feeling began. It wasn't a sharp pain. It was a hollowing out, a deep, quiet emptiness where she used to be. I went into her kitchen because it was where she had always been. The kettle was there, her apron on the hook. It still smelled like her, like lavender soap and the cinnamon she sprinkled on her oatmeal. And then I found the letter. My hands were shaking. I sat down at the kitchen table, the same table where I'd eaten 1,000 meals. I slid my finger under the flap. It wasn't glued shut tightly. It was as if she knew my strength would be gone. I pulled out 3 pages of her stationery, the pale blue paper with the little birds at the top. She'd bought it years ago and never used it. Too fancy for just any old note, she'd said. I began to read. My dearest Clara, if you are reading this, then I am gone. And I am so sorry, my love. Sorry for the silence. Sorry for the secret I have carried. But most of all, sorry for the pain I know this will cause you. Please find a comfortable chair, Make a cup of tea, take a deep breath. This is not a simple story, but it is yours, and it is time for you to know it. I remember staring at those words. The secret I have carried. They didn't make sense. My mother didn't have secrets. She was an open book, a gentle, predictable, open book. I looked out the window. The rain was still falling. It looked like the world was crying. I made the tea, just as she'd asked. Chamomile. I wrapped my hands around the warm mug and I kept reading. And as I read, the mother I knew began to change. The ground beneath me, the ground I had stood on my whole life, it didn't crumble. It just shifted. It became a different land altogether. The present-day kitchen fades into subtle, dreamlike reenactments. A younger Eleanor, seen from behind or in silhouette, writing at a desk. Images of a younger, unfamiliar man. A train station. All feel like memories being pulled into focus. Reading Mother's words, intertwined with her own reactions. Her letter didn't start with the secret, it started with love. I want you to know, first and forever, that being your mother has been the greatest joy of my life. From the moment I held you, a squalling, beautiful little thing with a fistful of my hair, I knew my purpose. You were my sunrise. I cried then. A hot, silent tear dropped onto the blue paper, smudging the word sunrise. I wiped it carefully. This was her last letter. I couldn't ruin it. She wrote about my childhood, things I had forgotten, the time I made a perfume from rose petals and mud and presented it to her with such pride. She'd kept the little bottle. She wrote about my father, about his quiet, steady love for us both. She said he knew. He knew from the very beginning. That sentence made me pause. He knew. Knew what? Then she began the real story. Clara, before I met your father, I loved someone else. His name was Thomas, and he was my entire heart. Thomas. I had never heard that name, not once. In all our talks about her youth, about life before Dad, there was never a Thomas. She described him, not with grand words, but with small, telling details, the way he laughed with his whole body, how he could fix any broken machine, the song he always hummed. They were young, 19. It was 1965. They had plans, big, bright, sprawling plans, to travel, to see the world, to live a life less ordinary. But life, she wrote, has a way of interrupting plans. Thomas was drafted, sent to a war in a faraway country whose name she could never pronounce without a knot in her stomach. They wrote letters, every day. She kept all of his, tied with a green ribbon, in a box under her bed. She described the fear, the waiting, the way the world had turned gray and anxious. And then the telegram came. He was missing in action, presumed lost. My world ended in that moment, she wrote. The color drained from everything. I was a ghost. I walked and ate and slept, but I was not there. Not really. Months passed. A year. The official letter finally came, confirming the worst. Thomas was gone. The life they had dreamed of was gone. It was during this time, this gray, empty time, that she met my father, Robert. He was a friend of a friend. Quiet, kind, stable. He saw her pain, and he didn't try to fix it with words. He just stayed. He brought her soup. He sat with her in silence. He was a safe harbor in a terrible storm. I did not love him, Clara, not then, not in the way I had loved Thomas, but I loved his goodness. I loved the peace he offered, and I was so very tired of being in pain. They married. It was a small, quiet wedding. She wore a simple blue dress. She wrote that she felt like she was watching the ceremony from very far away. And then she found out she was pregnant. With me. I stopped reading. I put the letter down. I looked at my hands, my own hands, as if seeing them for the first time. The story was sad, yes. A young love lost to war. A marriage of comfort. It was tragic, but it was understandable. It was history. But something cold was creeping into my heart. A suspicion. A dreadful forming thought. I picked up the letter again. My eyes scanned the next lines frantically. We were happy in our way. Your father was overjoyed about you. He painted your nursery himself, a soft yellow. He was a wonderful man, Clara. Never doubt that. He loved you from the instant you were born. He was your father in every way that truly, deeply matters. In every way that truly matters. The room felt airless. The sentence hung in the silence, and then came the next line, the one that changed my world. But my darling, biologically, Thomas was your father. Music stops abruptly. Complete silence for a few seconds, then a low, deep ambient sound begins, a heartbeat, a low drone. Present-day Clara's face still in shock, the letter in close-up. Flash images of Thomas, young and smiling, superimposed over a baby photo of Clara. I think I made a sound, a small, wounded sound like an animal. I dropped the letter. The pages fluttered to the floor. I stood up so quickly my chair screeched against the tiles. Thomas was your father. No, it was impossible. It was a mistake. A story she had written, a fiction from her grief. My dad, my quiet, gentle history teacher dad, was my dad. He had to be. He was the one who taught me to ride a bike, who held me when I had nightmares, who walked me down the aisle. His eyes were blue. Mine were blue, weren't they? I stumbled to the hallway mirror. I stared at my own reflection, really stared, for the first time in years. I was looking for him, for Thomas. Were my eyes his eyes? Was my chin his chin? I saw only my own familiar face, now twisted with confusion and panic. I ran back to the table, scooped up the pages. I had to know everything. She explained it. In careful, painful detail. After Thomas was declared missing, but before the final confirmation, there was a brief leave. He had come home, a stolen, desperate 3 days, a final goodbye. It was then that I was conceived. She didn't know. Not when he left. Not when the telegram came. She found out she was pregnant weeks after she had already agreed to marry Robert. She was terrified, alone, grieving. She told him. She offered him a way out. And my father, Robert, the man I had called Dad my whole life, he did the most extraordinary thing. He said he would marry her anyway. He said the child would be his. He said no one ever needed to know. He wanted to protect her, and he wanted me. He gave you his name, Clara, she wrote. He gave you his life. He chose you. Before he ever saw you, he chose to be your father. That is a love so profound, I have spent my life in awe of it. She wrote about the fear, the constant, low-grade fear of someone finding out, of a slip of the tongue, of a family member seeing a resemblance in an old photograph. She and Robert had moved to this very town where no one knew her past. They created a new story, a clean one. They were a young couple starting fresh. The war a sad time for everyone. Best left in the past. The secret became a part of our marriage, she wrote. A third person in the room, always silent. It bonded us in a strange way. We were a team, guarding this truth. And as the years went on, and we built a life, and we loved you, the secret didn't feel like a lie anymore. It just felt like our story. The story of us three, Robert, Eleanor, and Clara. It felt true. But it weighed on her. The guilt of not telling me. The fear that I would hate her for the deception. The fear that I would see my father, Robert, differently. That I would think his love was less because we didn't share blood. I wanted to tell you so many times, she confessed. When you turned 18, when you got married. But I was a coward, Clara. I loved the life we had. I loved the look in your eyes when you called him Daddy. I couldn't risk breaking that, so I stayed silent. And with every passing year, the silence grew heavier, and the right moment seemed farther away. She ended the second page with a plea. Please don't think of Robert as any less than your father. He was more. He was a father by choice. The deepest kind of love there is. And please, don't hate me. I have lived with my regret every single day. Music returns, slow and searching, a piano melody with a wandering quality. Visuals, Clara moving through the house, now seeing it with new eyes. She opens an old trunk. She flips through a photo album, looking closely at pictures of Robert. She finds the box with the green ribbon. I read the letter 3 times, sitting at that table until the tea went cold and the afternoon light faded into dusk. The words stopped being just words. They became a new reality, a new history. My first feeling wasn't anger. It was a deep, aching sadness. For her, for the young woman carrying such a heavy secret, for the weight she and my dad had carried together for me, for the love story with Thomas cut so brutally short. And then I thought of my father, Robert. I got up and went to the living room, to the bookshelf where we kept the photo albums. I found the oldest one. I sat on the floor and opened it. There was a picture of him holding me as a baby. I was just a bundle in a blanket. He was looking down at me, and the expression on his face, it wasn't just happiness. It was wonder. It was devotion. It was choice. I saw it now. He was looking at the greatest, most deliberate choice of his life. I traced his face with my finger. Thank you, I whispered to the empty room. Thank you for choosing me. The anger came later. In little waves. Why didn't she tell me when I was an adult? Didn't I deserve to know my own story? Who was I, really? Was I Clara, the daughter of steady, kind Robert? Or was I Clara, the daughter of a ghost named Thomas, a man of laughter and machines and a song I would never hear? I needed to know more. I needed proof, not just her words. I went upstairs to her bedroom. It still smelled like her. I knelt by her bed and pulled out the old wooden box I'd seen 1,000 times but never opened. It was heavy. Inside, under a few pieces of old jewelry, was a smaller tin box. And inside that, tied with a faded green ribbon, were the letters. Thomas's letters. Sound of ribbon being untied, paper rustling gently. My hands trembled as I untied the ribbon. The paper was thin, fragile. The handwriting was bold, masculine, but slanted with haste. I picked one at random. My dearest Ellie, it began. He called her Ellie. No one ever called her Ellie. It's raining here, a cold, miserable rain, but I'm thinking of you in the sunshine in your yellow dress, and it's like a little bit of warmth in my pocket. I started to cry. Not for myself this time, but for them, for the love in these pages, for the future they lost. I read about his dreams. He wanted to own a garage. He wanted to fix cars and come home to her, his hands dirty, his heart full. He wrote about the house they would build, the trips they would take. He asked about her mother's garden. He signed every letter, yours forever, Thomas. I read them all, every single one. And with each letter, Thomas stopped being a ghost. He became a person, a young, hopeful, brave, scared person. My father, my biological father. At the bottom of the box was a photograph, a black and white snapshot curled at the edges, a young man leaning against a car, grinning at the camera. He had my eyes, not just the color, the shape, the way they crinkled at the corners when he smiled. I saw it instantly, a piece of me, looking back at me from the past. I held that photo to my chest and wept. For him, for the life he didn't get to live, for the daughter he never knew he had. Mark found me there on the bedroom floor surrounded by letters. He didn't say anything. He just sat down beside me and put his arm around me. I showed him the photo. I told him everything, my voice cracking. He listened. He just listened. Then he said, "So you had two fathers who loved you. Before they even met you, they both loved you." His words were like a balm. They didn't simplify the complexity, but they framed it in love. Music swells into a warmer, more resolved theme. Strings join the piano, creating a sense of acceptance and connection. Visuals: Clara and Mark visiting Robert's grave, Clara planting daffodils, yellow, in her mother's garden. A final shot of the photo of Thomas, now framed and sitting beside a photo of Robert on a shelf. The days that followed were strange. I felt like I was living two lives. The old one, where I was simply Robert and Eleanor's daughter, and this new one, where my roots were more tangled, more tragic, but also more beautiful in their way. I went to see David. I had to tell him. He had a right to know, too. He wasn't my full brother. The thought made my heart ache. I was nervous. David was so black and white. How would he handle this gray, complicated truth? I told him at his kitchen table. He listened, his face unreadable. When I finished, he was quiet for a long time. Then he reached over and took my hand. "Clara," he said, his voice thick, "that man who taught me how to throw a baseball, who sat up with me when I was sick, who drove me to college, that's my dad, our dad. Nothing on a piece of paper changes that, and you're my sister, period." We cried then, together, for the parents who had carried such a weight to give us a normal, happy childhood. I went to the cemetery. I stood between my father's grave and my mother's. I put daffodils on both. "I know," I said to my mother's headstone. "I know everything, and I don't hate you. I wish you hadn't carried it alone, but I understand." To my father's, I said, "Thank you for your choice, for your quiet, mighty love. I was the luckiest daughter in the world." And then one afternoon, I took the photograph of Thomas. I bought a simple frame. I placed it on the bookshelf in my living room. Not hidden, not in a box. Right there next to the photograph of Robert holding me as a baby. Two fathers, two loves, one that gave me life and one that gave me my life. The secret was out now. It wasn't a weight anymore. It was just my story. A story of love lost and love found and love chosen. A story of a mother's fear and a mother's love. A story of a man who saw a scared woman and an unborn child and said, "I will be your family." I never found any living relatives of Thomas. In a way, I'm glad. His story for me is in those letters, in that photograph, in my own eyes when I look in the mirror. My mother's letter ended with this: "Clara, we are all mosaics, made up of pieces of the people who loved us, the people we lose, the secrets we keep, and the truths we finally learn." Don't let this break your mosaic. Let it complete it. You are my daughter. You are Robert's daughter. And you are a part of Thomas, too. That doesn't make you less. It makes you wonderfully, uniquely more. Carry us all with you and live a life full of the peace we sometimes struggled to find. That is all I have ever wanted for you. And so I do. I live my life. I make my tea. I tend my garden. I love my husband. And sometimes on quiet evenings, I take down Thomas's letters. I read about the garage he wanted to build, the trips he wanted to take. And I hum a little tune I don't recognize, but that feels familiar in my soul. The silence in the house isn't heavy anymore. It's just quiet. A peaceful quiet. And in that quiet, I can hear them all. My mother's gentle wisdom, my father's steady love, and a young man's laughter echoing from a photograph, finally coming home. The greatest gifts my mother left me weren't in her will. They were in her silence. And in her courage, finally to break it. She gave me the truth. And in doing so, she gave me a deeper understanding of love, in all its complicated, messy, beautiful forms. She taught me that family isn't just who you come from, it's who chooses you, and who you choose to hold in your heart forever. Did you like the story, and which city are you listening from? Thank you so much for your sweet support. I'm looking forward to your comments on the story. On the screen, you can see 2 new life stories that I highly recommend. There's so much more on my channel. Don't forget to subscribe. See you in the next life story with love and respect.